Every morning began the same way. The buzz of call lights, the squeak of wheelchairs in the hallway, and the faint smell of disinfectant clinging to the air. I had a window seat, but the view was nothing more than a cracked parking lot and a few tired trees that lost their leaves years too soon. That view had been my daily companion for 3 long years. I had not chosen this life. My daughter, Madeline, and her husband Ryan had made that decision for me after I slipped on the kitchen floor and broke my hip. They said it was for my safety, that I needed full-time care. But I could not shake the truth that whispered every night as I lay awake. They wanted me out of the way. Out of their home, out of their busy lives, out of sight and out of mind. The staff here were kind enough, but kindness does not replace family. They gave me my medication with sing-song voices as though I had not managed my own pills for decades. They wheeled me to bingo nights and television hour, as if my life had been reduced to scheduled activities on a clipboard. And when the halls grew quiet in the evenings, I was left with nothing but memories, some sweet, most heavy. I thought often of the last real family moment we shared. It was my grandson's 9th birthday, and I had saved for months to buy him the baseball glove he wanted. His smile lit up the room when he tore open the package, and for a fleeting moment, I felt like the grandmother I used to be. But then Madeline pulled me aside, her voice sharp. She told me my gift made them look bad, that I was trying to buy affection that should belong to her. That sting never left me. It wasn't about money. It was about wanting my grandson to feel seen, to feel loved. Yet somehow she twisted it into selfishness. So I sat there by the window each day, wondering how I had become a burden instead of a mother, an inconvenience instead of a person. I told myself this was the ending to my story, but life, as I was about to discover, had other plans. The day everything changed began like any other. I was halfway through a lukewarm cup of coffee in the common room when Janet, one of the nurses, came over with a look I had never seen before. "Elaine," she said softly, "there's someone here to see you. A lawyer." A lawyer? The word felt foreign in my world of pill cups and bingo cards. My heart stumbled. I had no business with lawyers. My will was simple. What little I had would go to Madeline and the grandchildren. Why would a lawyer be looking for me? I shuffled down the hallway, the tap of my cane echoing off the linoleum. When I entered the family conference room, a man in a dark tailored suit stood up. He looked to be in his early 50s, with kind eyes and the calm voice of someone who had delivered difficult news before. "Mrs. Porter," he said, offering his hand. "My name is Richard Hale. I represent the estate of your brother, Thomas Porter. I'm very sorry for your loss." The words sank in slowly. My brother Thomas. We had not spoken in years. Our last conversation had ended in anger, and I had carried that regret like a stone in my chest. Now he was gone, and all I could do was sit down before my legs gave out. Richard continued gently, "Your brother left specific instructions that I meet with you in person. He wanted you to know that he thought of you often." I swallowed hard, my throat dry. What did he leave me? Richard opened his briefcase and laid out several documents. "Your brother owned a ranch in Yellowstone County, Montana. 2,000 acres of land, passed down through your uncle, which he has now left entirely to you." I blinked at him. A ranch. That sounded like something out of a novel, not my life. "And there's more," Richard said, sliding over another set of papers. "Your brother managed his finances carefully. Investments, land rights, mineral royalties. Altogether, the estate amounts to roughly $8.6 million. The numbers blurred on the page. 8 million. It was impossible to imagine. For a woman living in a nursing home, carefully rationing her pension to pay for her care was overwhelming. But before I could speak, the conference room door burst open. Madeline stood there, her hair perfect as always, her smile wide but strained. Ryan followed close behind, his eyes scanning the table like a hawk spotting prey. "Mom," Madeline gasped, rushing to my side with a performance-worthy display of concern. "I came as soon as I heard about Uncle Thomas. Are you all right? Why didn't anyone call me first?" Her words were honey, but her eyes were on the documents spread before us. In that moment I understood the truth. She had not come for comfort. She had come for the inheritance. Richard cleared his throat, shifting uncomfortably as Madeline slid into the chair beside me without waiting for permission. Ryan stayed near the door, arms crossed, his gaze locked on the papers like they were prey he was ready to pounce on. "I'm her daughter," Madeline announced quickly. "I help manage all of Mom's affairs now. So please, go ahead. We're all family here." She placed her manicured hand over mine. giving it a squeeze that felt more like control than comfort. I pulled my hand away. Actually, I said, steadying my voice, I'd like to hear what Mr. Hale has to say. Directly. Madeline's smile froze for a second, but then returned, brighter, faker. Of course, Mom. I just want to make sure you understand everything. Legal language can be so confusing. It was the same patronizing tone she had used for years, the one that always made me feel small. Richard looked at me, not her. Along with the ranch, your brother also left you a letter. He wanted you to read it privately. He slid an envelope across the table, my name written on it in Thomas's familiar hand. My fingers trembled as I opened it. The words blurred as I read, but I forced myself through every line. Elaine, if you're reading this, I'm gone. I should have called you years ago, but pride kept me away. I know how Madeline treated you and I couldn't stand by anymore. This ranch was meant for you from the start. You sacrificed so much for me when we were kids. You deserve better than a nursing home. Live the life you want, not the one others force on you. Your brother, Thomas. Tears burned my eyes. He had known. All these years he had known. What does it say, Mom? Madeline leaned over, trying to peek at the letter. I folded it quickly and slipped it back into the envelope. It's private, I said firmly. Her smile tightened. Well, that's fine, but Mom, you have to be realistic. A ranch. Investments? That's not something you can handle at your age. You need help. Our help. She gestured to Ryan, who nodded as if he had been waiting for his cue. I have some experience with property, he said. We could list the ranch, get a strong offer, and move the money into a family trust. That way, everything is safe and well managed. I looked at them both. Where have you been for the past 3 years? My voice cracked but carried the weight of years of silence. 3 years of birthdays, holidays, doctor visits. You visited me 4 times. 4 times. And now, suddenly, you're here the moment you hear about money. Madeline's face flushed. Mom, that's not fair. We've been busy with the kids, with work. Too busy to call. Too busy to bring the children to see me. But not too busy to rush here the moment there's a lawyer. My voice steadied as I spoke. Family doesn't vanish until there's something to gain. For once, Madeline had no reply. The room grew quiet, the air thick with truths too sharp to ignore. I folded my brother's letter against my chest, and for the first time in years, I felt the first stirrings of strength return. Richard adjusted his glasses and reached for another folder from his briefcase. His expression was calm, but his eyes carried the weight of something heavier than legal documents. Mrs. Porter, he said carefully, your brother left instructions that I share this with you, only if your family tried to pressure you about the inheritance. I felt Madeline stiffen beside me. Ryan shifted his weight at the door, his jaw tightening. Richard broke the wax seal and slid several papers across the table. Thomas hired a private investigator. He wanted to be sure you were protected. The top page stopped my breath. It was a copy of a withdrawal slip from my bank account 3 years ago. My signature sat at the bottom, except it wasn't mine. This, Richard explained, was a withdrawal of $22,000. The investigator obtained security footage from the bank that day. He tapped another sheet, and there, in black and white, was Ryan, standing at the teller's window. I stared at the grainy image, my chest tight. You forged my name? Ryan lifted his hands defensively. Now hold on. That's not what it looks like. There was a mix-up. It looks exactly like theft, I interrupted, my voice sharper than I expected. Richard continued, flipping to another set of documents. There's also this. 2 weeks before your father passed, Madeline had him add her name to the deed of his house. He was too ill to understand what he was signing. When the property sold, you received $85,000, but the sale price was $185,000. The missing $100,000 went to your daughter. My heart pounded in my ears. For years I had wondered why my share had been so small, but Madeline had shown me receipts, claimed there were repairs and taxes. I had believed her. Mom, Madeline said quickly, her face pale, that was years ago. Dad wanted me to handle things. I did what I thought was best. You stole from me, I said quietly. The words tasted bitter but true. Richard placed a small digital recorder on the table and pressed play. My daughter's voice filled the room. I'm calling about your memory care unit. My mother is showing signs of dementia, confusion about finances, paranoia, forgetting to pay bills. We'll need placement soon. I clutched the armrest of my chair as the recording continued. She had listed symptoms I never had, painting me as a helpless, fading woman. Madeline reached for my hand, her voice trembling. Mom, please, I only did that because I was worried. I thought you couldn't live alone anymore. I thought. You thought wrong, I snapped, pulling my hand away. You wanted me out of the way. You wanted access to everything I had left. The silence that followed was suffocating. Ryan glanced at Madeline, then back at me, his mask of calm beginning to crack. Richard closed the folder gently. Your brother was very thorough. He wanted to make sure no one could ever question the truth. Miss Porter, you are not powerless, you are not confused, and you are not alone in this. I pressed the letter from Thomas closer to my chest. For years I had doubted myself. For years I had believed I was losing my grip on reality. But the evidence was here, undeniable. And for the first time I realized that the burden of shame did not belong to me. It belonged to them. That night I barely slept. The evidence Richard had shown me replayed in my mind, like a cruel film. Ryan at the bank, Madeline's name on the deed, her voice on the recording. Every memory I had of doubt and confusion suddenly took on new meaning. I had not been losing my mind. I had been gaslighted by the very people I trusted most. The next morning, Madeline arrived with the children. It had been months since I last saw them. My grandson, Caleb, sat glued to his phone, while little Hannah clung to her mother's side, uncertain and quiet. Grandma, Hannah said softly, Mommy says we can take you to lunch today. Her small hand slipped into mine, and for a moment my anger softened. At the cafe, Madeline put on her sweetest voice, the one she reserved for strangers. Mom, we need to talk about the inheritance. This is a huge responsibility. You can't possibly manage a ranch and millions of dollars by yourself. Ryan leaned forward, lowering his tone. It's too much for you, we can help. Think of the kids' future's college security. If you sell the ranch and put the money in a trust, everyone benefits. I looked at their faces, rehearsed and expectant, and something inside me shifted. For years I had swallowed my protests, told myself it was better to keep the peace. But now my brother's words echoed in my head, live the life you want, not the one others force on you. I set down my teacup with deliberate calm. You're right about one thing. I don't know much about ranching. I don't know much about investing either. Relief flickered across Madeline's face. Exactly, Mom? That's why. But I can learn. My voice cut through her sentence like a knife. I managed a household for 30 years. I raised a child, worked full-time, paid bills, and kept food on the table. Do you really think I can't learn to run a ranch with help from the right people? Ryan's jaw tightened. This isn't realistic. What's not realistic, I said, is expecting me to hand over everything just because you suddenly remember I exist. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Even Caleb looked up from his phone, wide-eyed at the firmness in my tone. I'm moving to Montana, I said, each word steady. I'll see the ranch for myself. And from now on, I will make my own decisions. Madeline's lips parted in shock. Ryan muttered something under his breath, but I didn't care. For the first time in years, the choice was mine. As I walked out of the cafe, the sun warming my face, I felt a surge of freedom I hadn't known since before the nursing home. It wasn't just about money, it was about finally standing up, finally refusing to be dismissed. And it was only the beginning. The drive to Montana took 6 hours, but it felt like crossing into a different world. Gone were the gray walls of Clearwater Nursing Home, replaced by rolling hills, open sky, and the steady rhythm of freedom. When the car pulled into the long gravel driveway of the ranch, I pressed my hand to the window, hardly believing it was real. The main house was a sturdy log home with a wide porch, surrounded by fields that stretched as far as I could see. In the distance, snow-capped mountains rose like guardians watching over the valley. For the first time in years, I felt like I had arrived somewhere I belonged. Waiting for me were Frank and Linda Garrett, a couple in their 60s who had managed the ranch for my brother for over 15 years. Frank had a weathered face and strong hands, while Linda's smile carried the warmth of someone who had seen every season of life, and still chose kindness. Welcome home, Mrs. Porter, Linda said, pulling me into a gentle hug. Thomas spoke of you often. He wanted this place to be yours. They gave me a tour of the property. Frank showed me the barns and corrals, explaining how Thomas had built the cattle herd slowly over decades. About 200 head of Angus, he said proudly. Good grazing land, steady water. This place runs like a well-oiled machine. Linda took me through the garden and root cellar, pointing out the rows of preserved vegetables. Thomas always said hard work tastes better when it's shared, she laughed. Everywhere I looked, I saw signs of my brother's careful planning. Solid fences, organized records, books on ranch management neatly stacked in the office. He hadn't just left me property, he had left me a life ready to be lived. That evening, I sat on the porch with a cup of tea while the sun dipped behind the mountains. The air smelled of hay and earth, so different from the sterile hallways I had known. Frank was mending a fence in the distance, Linda hanging laundry on the line. It was simple, ordinary, and it felt extraordinary. I whispered to myself, I'm not a patient here, I'm not a burden, I'm alive. For the first time in years, I went to bed without the hollow ache of being unwanted. The ranch creaked softly around me like it was breathing, and I thought of Thomas's letter. Live the life you want. I realized I was doing just that. I was no longer surviving in someone else's shadow. I was beginning again on my own terms. 10 days passed quickly, each one filled with the steady rhythm of ranch life. I learned the routines, asked questions, even drove the old pickup down the dirt road with Frank sitting beside me, guiding patiently. For once I felt capable, strong and steady. On the 10th evening the phone rang. I almost didn't answer, but the caller ID showed Madeline's number. My hand shook slightly as I picked it up. Mom, she said, her voice sharp and urgent, please tell me it isn't true. People are saying you've moved to Montana. You can't be serious. You can't live out there alone. I looked out the window at the pasture, golden in the late sunlight. It's true. I'm here and I'm managing just fine. This is insane, she snapped. You'll get yourself hurt. What if you fall? What if you forget your medication? What if something happens? The same thing that would have happened at Clearwater, I replied calmly. A doctor is 10 minutes away, and Frank and Linda are nearby. I'm not helpless, Madeline. Her tone shifted to a colder edge. If you won't listen, we'll have to contact Adult Protective Services. They'll see you can't manage and they'll appoint guardianship. Then you won't have a choice. I felt the anger rise, but I steadied it into resolve. You can try. But your Uncle Thomas prepared for this. Mr. Hale has full documentation of my competency, medical records, financial assessments, even statements from people here who've seen me manage perfectly well. And if you push, the evidence of what you and Ryan did will come to light. Do you really want that? The line went quiet. For a moment, all I heard was her unsteady breathing. You don't understand, she whispered. We were just trying to protect you. No, I said firmly. You were trying to control me. There's a difference. Ryan's voice suddenly broke into the call, his tone hard and threatening. Elaine, listen carefully. This money doesn't just affect you. If you make bad choices, we'll all pay for it. I don't think you can just cut us out. You need us. I closed my eyes, feeling the weight of his words. Then I opened them, staring at the land that stretched endlessly around me. I needed you 3 years ago. You weren't there. I don't need you now. Before either of them could respond, I hung up. My hands were trembling, but not from fear. For the first time, I had stood my ground completely. As I set the phone down, Linda stepped into the room with a warm smile. Everything all right? I nodded slowly. Yes, everything's more than all right. For once, I finally feel free. Weeks turned into months, and slowly the ranch began to feel less like an inheritance and more like home. I learned to wake with the sunrise, to walk the pastures with Frank, to listen as Linda showed me which herbs grew wild by the creek. My body ached in new ways, but the aches were honest, earned, and nothing like the dull weight of loneliness I had carried in Clearwater. Then one crisp morning I saw a familiar car on the gravel road. My chest tightened. Madeline stepped out slowly, her shoulders slumped, her eyes red-rimmed. She looked smaller than I remembered. Hello, Mom, she said softly. I stood on the porch, arms crossed, waiting. The kids miss you, she whispered. Caleb asks about you all the time. Hannah draws pictures of you almost every week. She swallowed hard. And I miss you too. I stayed silent, letting her words hang in the cold air. Finally, she added, Ryan and I were divorcing. When he realized we weren't getting access to your inheritance, he showed his true self. It turns out he wasn't just stealing from you. He was stealing from me too. For a moment my heart ached, not with pity but with recognition. I knew what betrayal felt like. I came to apologize, Madeline said, her voice breaking. Not the kind of apology to make things go back the way they were. I know I can't erase what I did, but I want to start again. I want to be better. I want the kids to know their grandmother. I searched her face. For the first time in years, I saw no performance, no calculation, only humility. That depends, I said carefully. Are you here because you want a relationship with me? Or because you want something from me? Her eyes filled with tears. I want my mother back. The words cracked something inside me. They weren't enough to erase the pain, but they were enough to open the door to something new. Come inside, I said finally. We'll have coffee. Inside the kitchen, the smell of fresh bread lingered. We sat at the table where Thomas's records still lay stacked neatly. For a while we spoke little, just letting the quiet settle between us. As I poured the coffee, I caught sight of my reflection in the window. The woman staring back was not the weary, forgotten figure from Clearwater. She was strong, sun-kissed, her shoulders straight, her eyes alive. She looked like someone who knew her own worth. Thomas had been right. I deserved better than what I had accepted for so long. But more importantly, I had finally demanded it. Later, as Madeline hugged me goodbye, I knew the road ahead would not be simple. Trust, once broken, takes time to mend, but at least we had taken the first step. That evening, as the sun set behind the Montana mountains, I sat on the porch and whispered to myself, I am free. I am home. And now, to you listening to my story, I wonder, what would you have done in my place? Have you ever had to reclaim your worth after being pushed aside?